The Fondazione is an instrumental body of the Consiglio Nazionale dei Dottori Commercialisti e degli Esperti Contabili. The Fondazione carries out activities of scientific research aimed at the development of the accountancy profession. In Italy, there are approximately 120,000 registered chartered accountants, and most of them practice their profession within an organized professional firm that provides, among others, assistance and consultancy services in accounting and taxation. So the Fondazione is a technical scientific partner in the FRED2 project. And within this framework, the Fondazione has participated in the design and implementation of a survey conducted through a questionnaire addressed to Italian chartered accountants working in an organized professional firm. So the main purpose of the survey was to ascertain the behavior of Italian chartered accountants towards fraud at EU level during their activity of advisors to enterprises. It is important to point out that Italian chartered accountants provide services to most of the Italian micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, while a minority of them is assisted by other non-registered individuals. So the survey sample consisted of 3,073 chartered accountants who responded to an online questionnaire sent to the Fondazione mailing list on August 1st, 2024, this year. The answers were also collected online until 30 September. In this graph, the graph shows that 15% of the sample stated that they do not practice in an organized firm. So if we apply this data to the total of members by inference, we may affirm that there are approximately 102,000 chartered accountants practicing in an organized firm. Regional distribution of the survey sample. In this case, we have only one data for segmentation, the sample, and this data is regional distribution. The graph shows the sample shares per region in relation to the share of registered members per region, highlighting as some regions are overrepresented while others are underrepresented. So in the next slide, we have the possibility to see better this element. Here we have the geographical macro area distribution for the survey sample. And as we can see from this graph, the North macro area is overrepresented, while the South macro area is underrepresented. Clearly, this fact may invalidate the results of the survey, which remains, however, of great value due to the particular sensitive nature of its key questions. So, other structural element of the sample. Distribution of professional firms by size in terms of employees of their client enterprises. As we can see from the graph, professional firms assisting micro enterprises, 0 to 9 employees, clearly prevail with 67.7%, followed by those assisting mostly small enterprises with 27.6%, while medium-sized enterprises are the main size for 4.3% of the firms and large enterprises in 0.45% of the cases. If we cross the data by territory, as shown in this table, the territorial discrepancy between North and South becomes quite evident. In this table, we have percentage shares of professional firms by prevailing sites in terms of employees of client enterprises by territorial macro area. In the north of the country, the firms in which micro enterprises prevail are fewer than in the center and in the south, while the firms in which large, medium-sized, and small enterprises prevail show a higher percentage. Clearly, this feature is in line with the national economic structure that shows a more structured economy in the north than in the south of Italy. A large proportion of professional firms, 43.7%, have less than 20 client enterprises, while those with more than 40 clients are 33.4%. And if we see the distribution of professional firms, the shares of professional firms by number and type of client companies, so cross-checking the two dimensions, it is evident that the firms in which micro-enterprises prevail are those which in percentage terms have a greater number of client enterprises than the others. So these are important structural characteristics of the sample that is important to know. Distribution of professional firms by number of enterprises assisted in bookkeeping. In this table, we have percentage shares of professional firms by number of client enterprises assisted in bookkeeping by territorial macro area. As we see, professional firms in the south are on average smaller than those in the north. This picture is also in line with the data emerging from the analysis of the territorial economic divide. Okay, the risk of fraud in new funding. The percentage share of enterprises assisted by the firm in bookkeeping that have had access to European fundings in the last 5 years. This question is important for the core of our questionnaire. We are now approaching the core of our questionnaire, which included an explicit question on the occurrence of cases of fraud, defined as a potentially fraudulent behavior by the client enterprises of the professional firm. Client enterprises are defined as enterprises assisted in keeping accounts. Because we have different possible professional position for accountants. For example, auditors, for example, accountants specialized in practice financing, but in this case, we have only the position accountant is a professional, a consultant for their client enterprises for keeping assisted in keeping accounts. A filter question has also been included to restrict the sample only to client enterprises having received European fundings in the last 5 years, which reduced the sample of answers to 1,034, i.e. 42.4% of the total. In this graph, we can see a percentage share of enterprises assisted by the firm in bookkeeping that have received European fundings in the last 5 years by territorial macro area, because we have another important difference between North and South. So among the professional firms in the South, the percentage of those whose client enterprises have received European fundings in the last 5 years rises to 49%. While the same percentage in the center north dropped to 40%. Average range of contribution received values in thousands of euros. For what concerns the average range of the contribution received, it is evident from the graph that in most cases, the contribution has been less than 50,000 euros, 57.5% of cases, while 30.4% have received a contribution between 50 and 150,000 euros, and only 12.1% more than 150,000 euros. As to the type of contribution, the graph shows a majority of non-repayable contribution, with 47.2%, followed by capital grant with 33.1%, and subsidized loans with 16%. Lastly, the option other was selected only by 3.8% of the respondents, thus indicating that the three types already produced a fairly exhaustive representation of the phenomenon. It is worth highlighting in the specifications provided in the other type the frequency of the tax credit, which is particularly recurrent in the Industrial 4.0 program. In this graph, we can see accountants declaring that they have had an even indirect knowledge of potentially fraudulent behavior by their clients and its frequency. When asked whether they had even indirectly intercepted a potentially fraudulent behavior by their clients, 15% responded positively. 15%, although with varying degrees of intensity, while 85% stated that they had never intercepted such behavior. In particular, as shown in the graph, 12.2% said that they had encountered it rarely, 2.5% sometimes, and only 0.3% frequently. The graph, this graph shows accountants claiming to have intercepted and even indirectly potentially fraudulent behavior by their clients by territorial macro area. This graph clearly highlights how the phenomenon in question is more prevalent in the south than in the center and north. Indeed, the percentage of accountants claiming to have encountered the phenomenon, regardless of compared to a national average of 15% and above all to a lower 12% in the north. On the other hand, the amount and the type of the contribution received do not seem to affect the phenomenon. It was not deemed appropriate to report the relevant graphs here, since the data processed do not deviate from the overall averages. At this point of the survey, accountants were asked to indicate freely and spontaneously the measures that had taken. Well, 62 respondents answered this question, which was even more sensitive than the previous one, i.e. 43.4% of those who had answered positively to the key question, i.e. just less than 1 in 2. Wanting to summarize the answers provided by the respondents, it is possible to say that in most cases, the specification was of the resignation from the post type, while some respondents have specified to have reported the case to the competent authorities. In general, the phenomenon was described as a case of over-invoicing, and therefore of inflated costs or excessive expenses in relation to the economic structure of the company. It is also worth mentioning the case of those who pointed out that the company did not meet the requirements for obtaining the requested financing. So the final part of the survey and questionnaire was specifically aimed at assessing the usefulness of a set of economic, asset, and financial indicators extrapolated from the company's balance sheet in detecting, reporting potential fraudulent behavior. So the financial ratios considered are in order: EBITDA on ROI, the first. The second is the total net financial position, the value added on EBIT, capitalized cost on total fixed assets, operating subsidies on production value. For these financial ratios, the evaluation criteria based on the information potential of each individual indicator of possible fraudulent behavior. So we have a scale, a set of criteria, seven criteria: not at all, very little, a little, quite a lot, much, very much, completely. In this graph, we have the result of the evaluation, assessment of the informative potential of selected financial ratios in signaling potential fraudulent behavior. We have aggregate the 7 criteria in 3 dimensions: low equal not at all, plus very little, plus little; medium equal quite a lot; and high equal much, plus very much, plus completely. The graph shows that the most significant financial ratios are the first 2: operating subsidies on production value and capitalized costs on total fixed assets. In fact, it is these 2 indicators that have received the best ratings with respect to their informative potential. Another way to summarize the responses is to calculate a quantitative index by attributing a value to each response mode. In this case, the values attributed are as follows: not at all 0, very little 1, little 3, quite a lot 5, much 7, very much 8, completely 10. And the result is showed in this graph: assessment of the informative potential of selected financial ratios in signaling potential fraudulent behavior. The highest score is represented by capitalized costs on total fixed assets, immediately followed by operating subsidies on production value. In third place is the total net financial position, followed by value added on EBIT. And in the last place, therefore, considered of little significance, the EBITDA on ROI. I have to say that we were initially very skeptical about the survey's chances of success. But the responses we received exceed our expectations. Despite the sensitivity of questions asked, the accountants responded without hesitation. More than so we have more than 500 respondents also made themselves available to participate in a focus group to discuss the construction of fraud risk indices on company balance sheet data. Perhaps we don't need that many accountants to do a focus group of this kind, but I think it is an important sign of participation and willingness to research, and especially on such a delicate and sensitive topic. About indicators. So the subject of indicators, especially when used as warning indicators, is a much discussed topic among experts, not only with respect to fraud, but also in the context of business crisis. So it is undoubtedly true that economic and financial indicators can have an important predictive capacity, but it is equally clear that their use must be weighted, measured well against the objectives and application methods. So let's look at some opinions expressed by respondents at the end of the survey. For example, one among many. If I do fraud, I tend to hide in the average. So the indicators will be flattened to those of the sector, even with budgetary policies, obviously. In general, accountants point out that financial indicators are much more important than economic ones. For example, cash flow analysis is reported to be very important for the purpose, especially if the cash flow analysis is made with reference to the last 2 or 3 years, and if the ratios are analyzed over time by comparing the ex-ante situation with the ex-post situation. In my view, that are too many indicators that are only economic in nature, indicators that have a little capacity, at least in my professional experience, to act as warning lights of possible fraud. Another one. Generally, the values to be monitored concern changes in inventories, work in progress, on orders, invoices to be issued, and increases for internal work. So another one, in my opinion, the analysis of the results of the various management areas must be compared with the financial structure, ratios, and in particular with the extent of medium and long-term financial debts and the debt and self-financing capacity. This comparison could reveal some anomalies and manipulation of the balance sheet. So, in conclusion, accountants are skeptical about the information potential of financial statements to alert them to possible fraud. Not only because in many cases financial statements can be manipulated, but also because smaller companies, which are the vast majority, as we have seen in the slides, do not prepare financial statements. Therefore, the topic of predictive or warning indicators should be framed within the macro topic of internal and external company controls. In any case, it became evident that some indices, some indicators have a particularly significant informative potential in this regard, and they are operating subsidies on production value and capitalized costs on total fixed assets. I hope we can continue this research and collaboration so that we can go deeper into the analysis of the predictive potential of financial ratios, and more importantly, how to use them in the analysis. So, thank you.